There's an eternal question surrounding all relationships. How far would you go for the one you love? Well, if your answer doesn't include death, reanimation, or cannibalism, you might be falling a little short of 1993 standards. But there's no need for a zombie cookout here, because we're here to tell you that My Boyfriend's Back is not that bad. Welcome one and all to It's Not That Bad, the podcast that looks for A grades in B movies. Now, the early 90s were a fun and weird time because you could pretty much turn anything into a rom-com, it felt like. And this is definitely the situation that we're dealing with today, because today we are talking about 1993's My Boyfriend's Back. And here, returning to the show to go down this road, Philip from the Adapted to Screen podcast is back. Philip, welcome back to the show. How you doing, man?
Jason, thank you very much for having me back. It's an absolute privilege, and I have been very well. How about yourself?
I am doing so good. Now, in past episodes when you've been on here, you've kind of gone down the horror road, but now we're dealing with a comedy here. So what is it about this film that made you want to throw it out there?
Well, it's still within the horror-y, the horror-y genre, Jason. I think you'll agree. We have an element of zombieism and cannibalism, but actually, it's my favourite film of all time. I think it's extremely well written. I think it's got a fantastic cast. Extremely well acted, and not enough people know the film, and it deserves more attention. So I thought, why not discuss it? Because surely it's got a bad rating because people would just dismiss it, but it's actually a very, very good film.
And there's the funny thing too, like you have said that this is your favorite film, and yet it qualifies for this show. So I mean, do you feel slighted by that?
No, because I always, you know what I feel slighted by? I feel slighted by the things that I like that aren't very well known, and then they get picked up by like bigger channels, and then everyone, oh, have you seen that? I was like, I knew that. I was watching that 7 years ago when nobody cared, and now everyone cares, and it's no longer mine. You know what I mean? So I feel a sense of ownership over the film, even though I have nothing to do with the film being made or produced or acted in whatsoever. But I feel that it's kind of my film. I always, whenever we have people over, or I used to do like movie nights with my friends and stuff, that always made people watch this. And I remember one of my friends going, well, that's an hour and a half I'm never getting back. But he just didn't understand the film.
So this to you is kind of like Repo the Genetic Opera for Carrie and I, in that the movie itself is the litmus test for how well you're going to get along with somebody.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's very true. I had a friend who told me to go and watch Hobo with a Shotgun. And I watched it. I was like, "Oh, we could be friends now." I understand you very well.
see, that's what should happen now. Like you think about dating profiles and all that. Rather than put down likes long walks on the beach, literally just put a picture of your favorite film up there. And if someone gets it, they'll get you. That may be the most perfect way to find the people out there in your life that you want to stay in your life.
No, actually, let's push that a little bit further, Jason. I reckon that you're quite good with technical stuff. Why don't we set up a dating app, right? But the dating app has to be like the profile of your favorite film, and for the person to contact you if they like the look of your picture, then they have to at least answer 3 questions based on the film.
I kind of like that.
And then you can get together because then they've gone out and watched the film. They put effort in before they've met you.
Or one of those things where it's like, watch the film and then come back and tell me which character in the film you are. And if you pick this person, then we're good. We're okay.
I think you'll have a lot of thirsty men picking Basic Instinct and expecting them to be Sharon Stone.
No. Just no. But the one who picks Gene Triplehorn, you keep them.
Good old Gene Triplehorn, crikey.
All right, so before we go down too weird a road, we're about to go down an even weirder road with My Boyfriend's Back. But before we do, it is time to take this film and trailerize it.
In one small American town, one man is about to shoot his shot to get the girl of his dreams to go with him to prom night. Oh wait, I read that wrong. In one small American town, one man is about to get shot so he can get the girl of his dreams to go with him to prom night. Not a great plan. Enter Johnny Dingle, a lovelorn zombie who's come back from the dead for love. Luckily for him, he's grown up in the most oblivious and yet still accepting town in America. Seriously, is no one freaked out by the dead guy randomly walking around? Has no one seen a zombie film? I mean, there was a zombie movie playing at the theater with an actual zombie in the room at the time. This is why serial killers have a high kill count in slasher films, because movie characters are idiots. Sit back and grab someone to nibble for this zom-com. My boyfriend's back. Rated PG-13 for prom guest.
The amount of work you do on this podcast is absolutely phenomenal. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed that.
The funny thing is, how many of these trailers would you actually go to see the movie from if you heard it?
Well, I would go and see all of the ones that you do, Jackson, because you do it very well. We've started doing a little bit on our podcast where I just do it. I don't know. Well, I suppose was Inspector Gadget an American cartoon? I guess it was, wasn't it? Was it? Yeah. So I do like a bit of a trailer thing, but with the voice of the Hooded Claw.
Oh God.
Or a Dr. Claw or whatever his name was. But
I'll get you next time, Gadget. Next time.
That's exactly how I sound. But I just do it from the IMDb. I'll just do it from the IMDb listings. But because like sometimes if we're doing like we did Breakfast at Tiffany's and my co-host Richie went, that sounds terrifying, Phil. I'd never watch that film.
Yeah, because some of the write-ups, I'm not going to lie, some of the write-ups sit there and go, yeah, this character seems really stalkery. Maybe
Johnny. We're talking about Johnny now.
Well, yeah. I mean, in a lot of some of these other films too, it's like the character seems a little stalkery. Maybe not a romantic comedy here. But let's talk about who's in this film. The movie stars Andrew Lowery, Tracy Lind, Danny Zorn, Edward Herman, Mary Beth Hurt, J.O. Sanders, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Paul Dooley, Austin Pendleton, Bob Dishy, and Cloris Leachman, and it is the cinematic debut of Matthew Fox and Matthew McConaughey. So if you're looking for some early work, you found it. However, there is also an almost starring in this one because this film would have been the cinematic debut of one Miss Renee Zellweger, but apparently her scenes were cut. She was actually supposed to be in the beauty shop, but that scene got cut. The movie was directed by Bob Balaban, and it's the second movie that he directed. But he has also directed episodes of Tales from the Dark Side and Oz. However, there's an almost directed for this one. Peter Jackson apparently turned down the offer to direct this. And before that, Adam Marcus was originally supposed to direct the film, but apparently the studio didn't want a first-time director doing it. Second-time movie director? Sure, okay, but not a first time. But Adam Marcus would eventually go on to direct Jason Goes to Hell, which is funny because the movie is written by Dean Lowery, who wrote the screenplay for Jason Goes to Hell, as well as 2 episodes of iZombie. This movie is his first writing credit. However, the movie was almost titled Johnny Zombie. And even while they were filming, this was the working title of the film, Johnny Zombie. Thank God they changed the title. Like, honestly, if this movie was called Johnny Zombie, would you still go see it?
Well, I would have. So the way that I came across this film, I would have watched it anyway. But no, it's a very poor title, isn't it? Johnny Zombie is a very poor title indeed. My boyfriend's back is actually not even relevant to what happened because Johnny wasn't Mrs. Boyfriend anyway. So so it's kind of, but who cares? It's a great film.
Right. And the funny thing is, I mean, we all know the song My Boyfriend's Back. And for you, my dear listeners, I am not going to sing it, so you're welcome. But the funny thing is, they used the song in the trailer for the movie, but the song is never used in the movie. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know where they would have put it in the movie. Also, because I had a bit of an email exchange with Dean Lowry many years ago, and he told me that Disney own it, and that goes to show with the end song, which was performed by the Mickey Mouse Club band at the time, or the incarnation of the Mickey Mouse band then. So it was already Disneyfied when it was being made. So probably and again, where would you have put that song? There was nowhere to put it, was there really? Although we've just we're releasing an episode this weekend of on our podcast about the Wanderers. I don't know if you know the Wanderers or not, Jason.
No, it's not ringing a bell.
Okay, it was an early 60s book about gangs in New York, like children's gang, no, teenage gangs, and the film came out in the 1970s. But that had it had Dion, it had Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons, and there was a scene where they were all at a dance, and this was playing, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Now, you mentioned Disney. So it's no surprise that this film had some money behind it. The film had a budget of $12 million, but worldwide only grossed $3.3 million. And when it was released on the August 6th, 1993 weekend, it debuted at number 16 with only $1.4 million. It is obviously the lowest grossing new release that week in wide release. The biggest grossing film that weekend was the debut of The Fugitive, which earned $23.7 million. Even number 2, Rising Sun, in its second week, only made $9 million. The other major release debut that week was The Meteor Man, which only brought in $2.6 million. So no one talked crap about the Marvels anymore. My Boyfriend's Back made $1.4 million in its opening weekend. But the reason why we are here, and not just because you love this film, is the critic score. Over at Rotten Tomatoes, this film has an audience score of 45%, of which I'm assuming 44% of that is you. And the tomatometer is a paltry 13%. So when you hear that number, how much do you want to, get some torches and start your own zombie cookout?
Well, it's funny because out of all the people that I've always shown it to, there's parts in the film where they'll go, well, that wouldn't happen, would it? That wouldn't happen. I say, the film would never happen. No one's coming back from the bloody dead, are they? You know what I mean? So you've got to accept it for what it is. It's a little bit like, I don't know. I had a friend once, a work colleague, and we was at work. Said, "Oh, what you do yesterday?" He went, "I went to watch Aliens versus Predators." I said, "Any good?" He went, "A bit far fetched, really." Gone, well, which bit, the alien or the predator? You know what I mean? I mean, come on, let's get our priorities straight. We're not watching a factual movie. We're watching a bit of enjoyment. And what I like about the film, to be perfectly honest, is it's extremely well written. And I know you mentioned written by Dean Lowry there. He actually wrote and executive produced a lot of Arrested Development. And if you watch Arrested Development, which actually just out of pure coincidence, I've been rewatching, you can see the writing in that is very, very similar to My Boyfriend's Back. It's very dry, very witty, very, like, people will say things like, it's kind of the way it's played very straight. The whole film is played very straight with this one bizarre thing going on. And once you accept that everyone has accepted this bizarre thing for what it is, and they're just going about their daily lives, that's when you can enjoy it and find it incredibly funny.
And that's the thing. Like, you have to understand that this film is very, you can't even say sarcastic, like, because it's not sarcastic, and it's not, it's not played for, like, any kind of Zucker Abrams and Zucker kind of slapstick laughs. It's almost, how do I even put it? Like I have some notes on this one here, but it does feel almost like an alternate reality painting of a time in the past. But I'm going to get to that in a little bit here. But let's talk about who's in this film and why they work or don't work. And we're going to start, of course, with Adam Lowry, who plays Johnny, the titular boyfriend, if you will, or eventual boyfriend. How was he for you in this?
I always thought he was. I thought he was more or less perfectly cast, because you can't have someone who's too good looking. You can't have someone who's confident, because that's not the character. The character is a bit dweeby, a bit not nerdy perhaps, but he's low on the social scale. So you've got to put someone within that kind of that realm, that character. You've got to find someone who looks a little bit like that. It's actually quite funny where you mentioned earlier on in this, there's three Oscar winners in this film. There's Matthew McConaughey, Clarice Leishman, and Philip Seymour Hoffman. But he also did a film, I think, just after this, School Ties, with Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Brendan Fraser. Mm-hmm. So his acting ability is good enough to get him in films with actors who were either really good, who were going to be really good. So no, I thought Andrew Lowry was. I think it was a good choice. Yeah, it was a good choice.
As I'm watching this, certain past performances by different actors in different movies continuously come to mind. And of course, the biggest one probably being Jonathan Silverman in Weekend at Bernie's, dealing with another dead person here. But it feels like that almost 80s kind of character that the likes of a Jonathan Silverman or an Andrew McCarthy would have definitely played. This is where I have almost a setting problem with the film, and it has nothing to do with the actors itself. So the movie feels like an 80s movie, even though it was released in 93. And so it's not that far off of how it feels. And it feels like it's set in the 80s or the early 90s. This film, I think, would have fared better, or at least been served better by the critics, had it been set in the 50s. And because it has that almost, the best of times Americana type feel to the town where everyone was happy. It feels like an episode of WandaVision in essence.
I think if you look at, say, for instance, what's it called? Night of the Creeps, where Night of the Creeps, the first bit was in the 50s and then the second bit was 30 years later in the 80s. You're right there, because even though Night of the Creeps was predominantly set in the 80s, it still had that 50s feel, because it had the callbacks and it had the beginning that being in the 50s. And you're right, like for instance, like the gingham blouses, just the way it all was. All you were missing there was like a drive-in diner. That's all you were missing, really, to kind of put it into the 50s. But then would it have been the same? I don't know.
Yeah.
But just going back on your previous point, I think if you look at a more recent film, which was very bizarre in its making, but was played kind of straight. What was it called? The End of the World, with Seth Green and all the famous actors. So when you watch that, it's like, what the hell am I watching? But like, if you're in that situation, or if that's what's going on, you can kind of go with it, if you know what I mean. And I think there's a similarity with that film, and when My Boyfriend's Back, you've got this one very strange thing that's happened, and everyone is just going along with it like it's very, very normal.
Yeah, you had almost that, this is the end, or the end is here, or whatever they called the film. It's not the world's end, because that's very different, very different. But you also have hints of Back to the Future, the first one, of course, where they go back to the past in the 50s and the whole everything set around prom. But you have a lot of those 80s kind of comedy kind of feels to it, and almost a little bit of Pleasantville as well. So there's parts of different movies that prove that the concept works. And once you get into it, because at first, I'll admit, it took me a little bit to get into it, but once I realized kind of what it was, I'm like, okay, I get it now. I do. I really appreciate it. And I think with Adam Lowry, before he dies, it's like, okay, he's kind of a wishy-washy kind of guy. He has no chance with Missy whatsoever. But then, of course, like, the confidence comes with, I guess, with being dead. I don't know. But because the town is the way it is and everyone accepts, by the way, spoilers like a mofo if you haven't figured this out by now, dear listeners. But the film is, and prepare to feel old, the film is 30 years old now. So, yikes. But still,
it's scary.
But it still works, which is kind of funny. But the funny thing is, like, with death comes confidence, apparently, and as the film goes, Johnny gets better as a character, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, I think what you start off with Johnny, you kind of start. It's kind of a blank slate. He's all he thinks about, but the film starts. He wants to ask Missy to the prom. That's his main aim. There's nothing else we know about him. We don't know if he's got any hobbies, any likes, any dislikes. He just likes Missy, and that's all he wants to do. And he says at the very start, "All I've done is fancy Missy my whole life," and so that's all we know. And then obviously, I suppose you're right there. There is some kind of confidence with being dead when he's back, because what's the worst that can happen? He's already dead.
Right? Exactly. Like, got nothing else to lose here. Tracy Lind, who of course played Missy and has not acted since 1997. How was she for you?
Oh, well, I was in love with Tracy Lind as a child. I first saw her in Class of 1999 when I was about 10, and I just thought she was beautiful. And then later on, I'd saw her in Fright Night Part 2, and then here she was in this. Now, I think she played the part of the local beautiful girl extremely well, especially when she didn't have any malice. You know what I mean? The kind of, because you might have that character, who, like I say, Mean Girls style, but she wasn't. She didn't have malice. She was a very nice person. Maybe it's just because I'm in love with Tracy Lind. I'm not quite sure. So maybe I'm biased. But I thought her character was really good. I thought she was very good. There wasn't too much development, because I don't think there was anything to develop, if you know what I mean. Like towards the end when she's going, "I'm not going to the prom with Buck," just because she'd already split up with him once, and yeah, he might have been creeping his way back in, as you expect the boy to do, but clearly she knew her own mind, and she wasn't going to be pushed around by her parents or by Buck. Yeah,
I mean, here's my problem. And first of all, good thing is that they didn't go with the trope in that Missy was the head cheerleader and Buck was the quarterback from the football team, so it made sense that they were going to go to prom together. Like, that's kind of tropey, and I'm glad they didn't go down that road. Missy was played as a, yes, the pretty girl in the high school and the object of Johnny's affection, but she was smart and she was artistic, and she had more to her than just being pretty. The problem, though, is that the whole idea that, she only goes for him after she thinks, he's like, "Well, I died for you." Like, oh, it feels kind of guilt trippy in a bit of a way. So I don't know if that plays against Johnny or plays against Missy. But I think the thing here, too, is that they use the whole thing as a morality point at the end, to shame everybody else. Missy's good enough as it is. They don't need to turn her reasoning for being with Johnny into a morality point for everybody else. But maybe I'm overthinking it.
Well, first of all, I think you probably are. This is not the Pelican Brief. The bit where you said about when Johnny says, "I died for you, I come back from the dead for you." One of just in the background, one of the girls goes, "My boyfriend won't even pump gas for me."
Yeah, that was good.
So. Yeah, so that's kind of, so what you're saying, like, it's not really guilt tripping, it's kind of highlighting the lengths Johnny will go to just to be with her, even though he kind of caused his own downfall in the first place. But, that's a different kettle of fish, isn't it?
Yeah. And the funny thing is that it kind of plays on the tropes of just what would you do for your girl? Like, thankfully, they do it in a very comedic kind of way, in a very almost it almost does parody the idea of what the 50s relationship was, albeit in middle America in the 80s. But I think she did very well. Like, I'm surprised she didn't get bigger than she actually was.
Well, the little bit of the backstory there, I think, I mean, and this is just me hypothesizing because she did drop off the face of the earth in 1997, but it was at the same time because she was in a relationship with Dodi Fayed, and I don't know if you know who Dodi Fayed is.
No, I do.
Yeah, so at the time where he died, she disappeared off the face of the planet. But there was a few of the films that she was in that he was producer of. So I think because she'd done an interview shortly after his death and spoke about how he was fairly abusive and stuff like that in certain situations. I'm not saying all the time. And I think then she got a bit of backlash from that because she said it after he was dead rather than while he was alive, so to speak. So maybe it had something to do with it, perhaps, but maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're not behind the scenes. We don't know the things that go on with these people, when they're not on screen. So, I mean, that's horrible to hear. I just wish that she had come back because she is actually a good comedic actress in this. And the fact that she plays it in that, and again, another character that as the movie goes on and as she finds herself defending Johnny to the town and that looks at, dead people walking around in the most plain as day kind of way. Also, there's a dead person walking around in your town. You might want to freak out a little, but no one does, but that's okay. But I think it adds to it. And much in the same way that, and I'm completely going on a limb here, but much in the same way that X-Men was an allegory for racism and discrimination, this film kind of feels that way too a little bit in times, and Missy is the voice of reason for that.
Yeah, I think I've always thought that myself. I think if you take Johnny out of the equation and will replace Johnny with a black person, as an example, then it might be exactly the same script, just with, different slurs, rather than dead kid.
But that's the thing. Like the fact that it's a zombie, you can take the allegory and treat it in a fun way. And people who don't want to think about it too much, people who aren't podcasters, they'll just enjoy the film for the laughs that it gives. But people who look into it sit there and go, I get it now. And the film is actually, I think, behind the scenes and maybe unintentionally or maybe intentionally, a lot smarter than people give it credit for.
Yeah, I mean, I know they said you could replace it with the black person. You could replace it. I mean, today you'd probably be a ginger person. the only ginger in town.
Oh man. And hey, one day Doctor Who's going to be a ginger. It's going to happen. One day.
Well, Catherine Tate's already been in it, so
we have ginger representation. It's all good. Oh, and don't forget Karen Gillan. Don't forget Amy Pond.
Oh, I would never forget Karen Gillan, ever.
Danny Zorn, who played Eddie, who was Johnny's best friend in this, and almost a snack. How was he for you?
Well, I think he was probably the only normal character. Like, out of everyone, he was, maybe Missy, Missy was fairly normal, but he was probably the only normal person in the whole film, whereas everyone was a bit quirky, a bit kooky, a bit nuts. He wasn't. He was the straight man of the whole. Even though he had his comedy bits, but he was kind of the foil that kept the whole thing going. I think he died about 10 years ago, which is a big shame.
You know what's funny? As I was watching this and watching his, gradual progression from please don't eat me to I think you should eat Buck. But his mannerisms in this reminded me, and I don't know if you've seen the film. Speaking of Karen Gillan, the movie Duel.
No, I have not.
Okay, first of all, great film. But the way that she goes through this film, at least her character goes through this film, in sort of almost a perpetual state of shock and confusion, and so much so that you're not exactly sure how to react to the absurdity of everything that's going on in your life, that you just sit there and almost blankly and matter-of-factly deal with everything. And that's kind of how Eddie deals with this in that everything is matter of fact to him, in that, okay, process, he's dead, he's back, he's a zombie. He tried to eat me. I didn't like that. I stepped away. He apologized. We're good again. And Buck's in his way. So you go ahead and you eat Buck. It's all good. But in such a plain matter of fact way that goes along with everything else in the film, that once you're in and on the ride's kind of fun.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely.
Edward Herrmann and Mary Beth Hurt, who of course played Johnny's parents in this. I personally got a big kick out of Mary Beth Hurt as Johnny's mom, but how were they as the parents for you?
Well, they had the best lines. They delivered them the best, and I think they were probably the two shining people in the whole film. And when Johnny, I mean, this is and this is a tribute to the writing. There was like a 3 or 4 minute bit where it was just the best jokes that you could probably ever get. So Johnny comes home and his parents initially, oh, what's going on? And his dad goes, Johnny, the doctor and the ambulance driver and the coroner and the embalmer, we all thought you were dead. And he goes, well, I got better, didn't I? And a typical mum response is, there's loads of food left over from the funeral. Are you hungry? It's just a typical mum thing to do. And he's like, no, thanks, I'm going to bed. And then he gets up and he sees he's got the bullet holes and he goes downstairs and his mum checks his temperature and goes, oh, you feel a bit peaky? He's like, yeah, because I'm dead. And she gets on the phone to the doctors and she's like, hello, my son Johnny? Yeah, he died, yeah. Well, he doesn't feel very well. And by then he's already gone. And she's like, do you want to speak to him? And he's not there. And you can imagine the receptionist on the other end of the phone going, oh, poor woman, she's lost her mind. She really has. She's phoning the doctors to check on, you know what I mean? It's with that. So that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant comedy. And then Johnny goes to school and the teacher's doing the register and she gets to his name and she's like, oh, ugh. And then he just walks in and he's like, I'm sorry I'm late. You wouldn't believe the trouble I had getting here. And she goes, yes, I would. And I'm not impressed. One demerit. It's just that little span of all of those jokes are so good. But the mom and the dad are so, she does the mom, but obviously just thinking about it now, it's the mom thing. She goes out and gets him food. So she wants him to eat. He tells her that he can't eat. He can only, well, I don't even think he tells her that he can only eat dead people. I think she must have figured that out for herself because she goes, pass me the butter. And he opens the fridge and there's a bloke in there that she's nicked from the morgue.
Well, this, of course, after she tried to serve up Little Chuck, like Big Chuck's.
Wasn't
other
that
kid.
Afterwards? Wasn't that afterwards?
No, because the body in the fridge was when Missy and her father were there having dinner after the lynch mob. Yeah. Now,
that's correct.
People who have never seen this film and they're tuning into this conversation halfway through going, what the are they talking about? What the hell kind of movie is this? There's bodies in the fridge. There's little kids on platters. There's a lynch mob happening going on. And there's a dead guy walking around middle America. Welcome to 1993.
Yeah. And in that scene as well, when she brings the kid home and Johnny's like, I can't eat a kid. And he puts him in the cupboard. And then the dad answers the door and it's Big Chuck. And he goes, oh, I heard your son died the other day. He's like, yes, we're very sorry for that. But he killed and ate my son today and we've come to kill him. And then the dad just turns around and goes, oh, honey, there's some angry men with guns. And he turns around and they're in the house. It's just it's just brilliant comedy timing. It's like, there's men here to kill your son. They've got the guns in the hand and you've let them in the house. And then they're like, oh yeah, we're sorry for your loss. And then the little kid comes out and he's like, hello, little Chuck. Little Chuck. And then she pulls out a shotgun. So it's that mother's instinct of feeding your child and protecting your child, even though your child's a human eating zombie. It's but all done with matter of factly, like you said, all done matter of factly. But no, they were brilliant. I thought they were fantastic throughout the whole film.
Oh yeah, I think it was the line of "You're not going to shoot me." I think I might. Yep. Since we're talking about Big Chuck here, let's talk about Paul Dooley as Big Chuck. Definitely, again, kind of like that, the allegory for the unaccepting, almost prejudiced kind of character that you might find in a small town, and I'm not trying to sit there and paint a broad stroke with this, but I'm sure everyone knows someone kind of like Big Chuck. But how was Paul Dooley? Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Stereotypes are used to get points across, but how was Paul Dooley in this role for you?
Well, I actually think that he was well, first of all, his character was great, but I thought he was a reasonable person. I think he is a reasonable person. The only reason why he was annoyed is because his son died and was eaten. That's the only reason why he was angry. But like, you could imagine, for instance, that if Johnny came home and said to his mum and dad, I'm getting picked on at school by Chuck, and his parents went to Big Chuck and said, your kid's picking on my kid, he'd probably go, look, I'll deal with it. I'll sort it out, not like get off my land or I'll shoot you. He seemed quite a reasonable person until his son was killed, and he found out that the zombie was going to eat his other child as well, even though he wasn't. He's well within his rights to go, hang on a minute, why is my other son in the human eating zombie person's house? So I thought he was a great character. He had good comedy relief, and I think the names that they called Missy, zombie slut, whore of the dead, him and his friends. I just thought, it was really, I thought it was great. Yeah, he did really well.
And the funny thing too is that it's not that he's seemingly upset that his son accidentally killed himself, because let's be honest, Chuck is the kind of idiot that would probably kill himself by accidentally, chopping his head with an axe. Makes sense. I think it's the fact that Johnny started to eat him that it's like, okay, my son's an idiot, but did you have to actually eat my son? I think that's where the line kind of got crossed, which is kind of funny when you put it into perspective.
Well, the one thing they did very well is even though it's a misunderstanding, because they say you killed and ate my son, he didn't kill him. We know he didn't kill him, but there was no witnesses there to actually see that. So technically, he would still be classed as killing someone because there's no one there to. And the fact they hit him afterwards kind of just adds to that a little bit, doesn't it? You know what I mean? It's like, I didn't rob the bank, but I've got the money from the bank in my house. So you can put two and two together. Go, well, you probably did rob the bank then, didn't you? Really? Even if you just found the money in the street, I can tie you to that robbery. So I can tie you to the murder because you wet the geezer afterwards, and there was no one there to witness it. So what else should we think? And I kind of lost my train of thought there, but sorry, I do apologise. But no, but he was very reasonable with the fact that that you've killed and ate him, and we're going to let you know that we're going to kill him. And they actually shoot him in the house, and he's like, "What are you doing? I'm dead already."
At least it didn't go on and on. It's like, don't shoot him again. It's not going to work. It was just wasting your bullets there. But I think the interesting thing too is that with little Chuck, well, not little Chuck, not the kid, but with Chuck, as played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, he plays Chuck in a way that kind of makes Big Chuck's aloofness almost kind of makes sense, because it was really weird to see Philip Seymour Hoffman in this kind of role, because you don't expect him to play, the monosyllabic idiot that just follows around the quarterback like a puppy dog here. But it kind of makes sense when you take a look at Paul Dooley and you take a look at Philip Seymour Hoffman in this and say, no, I could see them as father and son in this, at least with these characters.
Oh, 100%. And I'm pretty sure that this was his first film, Philip Seymour Hoffman, that is. And I think he's probably had a look at that script and went, and probably just like you said, he was probably, the character was just the normal kind of sidekick to, the posh boy at school, so to speak. But he's going, what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn the dial up to 11 now. Yeah. And I'm going to have some fun with it and see what they say. And they probably went, yes, just do what you want, mate. No one knows who you are. The film's not going to go anywhere. Just do whatever you like. And he was probably one of the he's one of the more memorable. He's much more memorable than what Buck was.
For the record, by the way, Philip Seymour Hoffman's first ever movie was a movie called Triple Bogey on a Par 5 Hole. But even before this, he was also in Scent of a Woman. So and Leap of Faith. So there are movies.
I do like Leap of Faith.
Yeah, movies prior to this for Philip Seymour Hoffman. But I think the problem with him, with his character, and it's the same problem I have with Matthew Fox's character as Buck, is that we didn't really get to know Buck and Chuck as much as we should have for me to dislike them. The thing with Buck is that he's just there, and we know that we're not supposed to like Buck because he's getting in the way of Johnny getting together with Missy. But the thing is, we don't get to see a level of their, not cruelty, but just we need a reason for them to be, or we need them to prove that they are an asshole so we can think, oh, okay, cool, the asshole got an axe to the head. That makes me feel better as a moviegoer. We need to hate Buck and Chuck more.
Well, the film's only about an hour and 30 minutes long anyway, so you haven't really got maybe the time to expand on that, like you said. I think you kind of I think the first, like the kind of basically they say, oh, like Mrs. broke up with Buck, so we know that straight away. And then there's the big band, and he comes and he's like, "I'm sorry, my car broke down, my battery ran down. I had to walk 20 miles." But he's making excuses why you didn't turn up to meet her. So he was doing something else, and he's a bit of a knobhead anyway. And Missy's lovely, so why is he treating this lovely girl like a rah? And then because that's where Johnny was going to make his move, Chuck sees him looking, and he just leans up against it and goes, "What you looking at, dirtbag?" And so you kind of get the idea that they're both a bit horrible already. But what I liked about that they didn't go into it because normally you get that, you get the trip someone over in the canteen and laugh, or it didn't need that. It didn't need it. It stepped away from the normal tropes of what you would get, because what you're getting in the long run is a town full of people who are just going, "Oh, there's the dead kid," like it's normal. You're not getting the traditional high school meanness. You're getting a story away from that. You don't need all those bits.
Austin Pendleton, who of course played the doctor in this, that eventually discovered a way to reverse the aging process by using parts of, or at least skin samples from Johnny post, coming back from the dead, and then wants to basically chop him up so he can, create an elixir of youth, if you will. How was Austin Pendleton for you?
Well, I first remember Austin Pendleton from Short Circuit, where he played the scientist. So he was kind of back in that kind of role again. But he was brilliant. He was brilliant because, again, brilliant jokes. Just like when Johnny goes with his ear, because Missy had bit his ear off when she was nibbling at him, and he just picks up and goes, "Hello, hello," just hilarious. It's just funny stuff, and he's actually really good up until the point where his assistant goes, "We can make," like he's created something that no one's ever created. He's turned the chicken into an egg. He has reversed the aging process. He is groundbreaking. We all know his name forevermore now because of what he's done. And he goes, "I want to save a young man's life. It's every doctor's dream." And she goes, "Do you know how much money you're going to make from this?" And he's like, "No, I can't. I just can't." And she's going, like, "Millions. Maybe I can." And then obviously when the townsfolk come, which was very Dracula-esque, I thought, like him looking out from high at the mob with the flaming torches and the big battering ram. It was very kind of that kind of Dracula-esque kind of picture shot. And it's like, "Right, no time for anesthetic. I need all of your body now before they get to you. I want you before they get to you." But I didn't and again, it's one of those where a film like this could make you dislike the Doctor. The Doctor's got an evil plan. He didn't have an evil plan. He was trying to do the best he could, and then went, oh, you know what? I could make a lot of money this way, so I'm just going to have to chop you up, Charlie. I'm sorry.
Yeah. One of the things that as we're going through some of these characters and how they're all very matter of fact through the whole thing. It reminds me a little bit of the movie The Dead Don't Die. Recently starring Bill Murray and Adam Driver and Chloe Sevigny. And it's a quirky film. And I'll be honest, I didn't like it in that sense because it wasn't played more for, it wasn't played overtly as a parody. Whereas this one, I think, had a movie like The Dead Don't Die actually taking some cues from this film, I think that movie would have fared better because this film seems to have its parody and its analogies on lockdown.
Well, this is the reason why I like this film so much, because it kind of created a subgenre of movies which I like to call zomcom. And I think other than perhaps Warm Bodies and I Buried My Ex, there aren't many films within that kind of zomcom genre because there just isn't. Now, whether because no one's interested is a different kettle of fish, but it's I think if you look at like how do you make zombies funny, well, you got Weekend at Bernie's, but Bernie's not a zombie, he's just dead, which that was funny. That was a funny film because you're in the situation you're in, and this again has probably taken it to the next level and gone, well, what if Bernie actually came back as a zombie? Because I think in number 2, I think in Weekend at Bernie's 2, he kind of didn't he got voodooed. Mm-hmm. He got a voodoo spell cast on him and he came back, or he was at least animated for a short period of time, was dancing and doing the conga or whatever he was doing. Or was that in the first film? I'm not quite sure. I can't remember. Those two films get mixed up a little. No, I think it was the second one, wasn't it? But no, that's why I like this film so much, because it's kind of like it's made its own niche. And that's what I try and explain to people. It's a zomcom. And I remember telling I had to go to Belgium for work once, and I was telling a friend about the film, and the Belgian bloke in front, he hadn't said a word of English the whole time. And I said zomcom, and he just turned around and went, zomcom? I was like, I've coined a new phrase.
Well, and there's the thing, like you take a look at a series like iZombie, and you've taken your typical kind of genre, the procedural, where every week it's a crime of the week kind of thing, and many shows have done it before, but this time it's with the zombie, trying to help solve the crimes. And it's kind of like watching Lucifer, but it's the devil who's actually helping solve the crimes. It's still a procedural, but it's got that little twist to it. This is very much like that late 80s, early 90s rom-com, but it's got a zombie at the center of it. And yeah,
I think if this was made in 1986 and Tom Hanks was the lead, it would still be known now as one of the best comedies ever made. I truly believe that.
I think there's one of the things too, is that despite some of the names that are in this film and what they eventually went on to do, prior to this, I think like some of the biggest names in here were like Cloris Leachman, who played like the zombie expert. Like you don't have big names, and even though you have a big studio behind you with Walt Disney Studios, you don't have the namers on the bill in order to be able to sell it.
No, and I think they probably didn't put very much into the marketing. In all fairness, they couldn't have. But I also think it was that time, it was that period of time where VHS, not DVD of course, but VHS home video, that was the big thing. And there was a lot of studios like Canon who would make all their money on video. They might have a short cinematic release, which was their marketing. They wouldn't spend 10 million on marketing. They'd put the film in the cinema, and then word of mouth would get it through on video from Blockbuster. Or that's where they'd make all their money. And I know there isn't any international sales, and probably because again, actually the video that I got, the way I come across it, there was a friend of mine, his neighbour had died, and he had like a shed full of videos, and the lady had given them all to my mate, and my mate said, just come round and just help yourself. And this was one I picked up, and I was like, oh, I'll watch it. And it actually had the it was like not for resale, and it had the barcode on the bottom. So obviously this was the video they were sending out to distributors to to get them interested in the film. But just like you said then about the weekend release, actually in my top 5, this is my number 1 favorite film of all time. My number 5 is The Fugitive. So 2 of my top 5 films came out the same week in 1993. But 93 was a good year for movies.
Yeah,
it was a good year.
I mean, the other thing too that I'm looking at this and thinking, it was put out by Walt Disney Studios, so clearly Disney has the rights to it, but it's not on Disney Plus. So I think there's a missed opportunity, because this is the kind of film that really I think they dropped like one S word in here, and I think that's about it. You don't really.
It's the very start, unfortunately, Jason. There's like I haven't got the only thing, because I've got 2 11-year-old girls and a 7-year-old boy. The only thing I don't like them watching is kind of anything of a not of a sexual nature, but like, I mean, swearing, action, violence, death, no problem with that. But when it comes to the like trying to explain, or like if there's a sex scene, so no sex scenes, and if something's a little bit racy, it's like so the very start of the film kind of kills it for me, because he's having the sexual fantasy at the very start, and it's like can't let my kids watch this. So probably that is probably what's holding it back from maybe being on Disney Plus, perhaps, or the fact that they don't even know they've got it.
Well, hey, Disney Plus, there's a bunch of people who would probably really enjoy this film, so maybe put it on your streaming service. It's
got Matthew McConaughey and Philip Seymour Hoffman, and put it on your bloody streaming channel.
It almost Renee Zellweger. One of the other characters I wanted to bring up here before we get into a couple of other notes here is Bob Dishy, who played Murray the Grave Digger. Again, this could have been one of those characters that was tropey and very creepy and dirty and whatnot, because he obviously works in a grave. He just deals with the dead people. But again, he fits the feel of the rest of the town in that, just another zombie coming out of the grave. It kind of happens, and just deal with it matter-of-factly. But how was Bob Dishy?
Well, he was in it for a short period of time, but he kind of acted as the person that moved Act 1 onto Act 2, and then finished off Act 3. So he was the cornerstone, really, because he was don't go out there, because you have to live here forever now, because I've seen this before. So you can't go out and, don't say I didn't warn you. And then when he comes back, like, there's only one person that can help you, and that's the woman whose husband come back. And then so that's where he starts to having to eat people, which sounds creepy in his way, but obviously he's got the urge. So it's not that creepy, because it's not like, oh God, I'm absolutely, because he says, I'm not going to eat people. Are you mad? But actually he's got the urge to eat people. So it's not too disgusting, so to speak. If you've got the urge, if you're a bird, you've got an urge to eat a worm, ain't you? You're a human, you're not eating a worm because it's disgusting. So, but then obviously at the end, when the townsfolk are trying to kill him, and his parents trying to, again, his mum pulls out a bloody Desert Eagle or whatever, a fucking Magnum 50 Colt bloody gun, and pulls it on everyone. And he diffuses that situation and just calms the whole town down and moves the film on to the very end. So he was really, even though he probably had 7 lines in the whole film, he was the cornerstone of the whole film.
There's one aspect, and I want to make it very clear. I liked this film. I had a good time with this film. It was a fun film, but there is an absolute dangling thread that this film left. And I'm just like, is no one going to bring this up? Because throughout the film, it's implied that zombies have happened before. So the gravedigger says, I don't think we've had someone come out of the grave for about 15 years. When the reporter is doing her report with the cop and all that, she's like, is there a zombie walking around again? Like, there was that problem like years ago. There's a backstory implied that would help explain, I think, why everyone is so freakingly matter of fact. Like, there's like, you look at J.O. Sanders, who was Missy's dad in this, like, your daughter's making out with a zombie and you're just pissed off because she's not going to the prom with Buck. That's your problem with this? Like, everyone is so, like, deals with this like it happens every other day. and it's not explained why. Is there something special about this town? It's just like imply that, okay, he just walked out of the ground because he wanted to go to the prom with Missy. Like that's a day that ends in Y in this town here. Does the lack of that explanation, or at least the expansion on that backstory, take away from the movie for you?
No, because it's now you brought it up, I'm going to think about it, but it's kind of, again, like everything else that might have to have 5 or 10 minutes dedicated to it. It doesn't, because it goes to the woman's house and she's like, yeah, my husband came back from the dead. It's unresolved issues. You've got to sort out your issues and then you can carry on. Okay, fair enough. Done, dealt with. And maybe that's why everyone in the town isn't bothered, because they've seen a zombie before and they were freaked. Maybe they were scared at the first time, and then the second time it's like, oh, okay, well, the first time it happened, it wasn't too bad because he did what he had to do and then he was back dead. So we just got to let the kid do what he needs to do, and then he's back dead.
Yeah,
I mean, we're all good and we can carry on.
Your town has a zombie expert. There has to be a reason why your town has a damn zombie expert. Give me something.
What's in the water? Yeah, no, but you don't. But again, Jason, you don't need it, do you? Because the movie is very fast paced, so you don't need it. It's not. If it was a 6-part TV show, you'd need a whole episode dedicated to the backstory, but you don't. You just it moves very quickly, very nicely. And before you know it, it's the end of the film. No, it's not necessary to know the ins and outs of what happened before, unless me and you're going to pitch a prequel, perhaps.
I mean, if you had, I'm so glad you mentioned this, because it's like you stole my notes. If you were to make a prequel to this and you set it in the 50s and you called it, again, something like My Boyfriend's Back or something like that, or something along those lines, and you set that up, again, set it in the 50s, I think it works better.
I think rather than a prequel, you just if you remade it and set it in the 50s, that's pretty cool. And it's something you mentioned earlier on with the Back to the Future reference. There's a big Back to the Future reference in the film where Danny Zorn's character punches Matthew Fox's character when he knocks him out at the prom, because that's what George does to Biff in Back to the Future. So I think that was a bit of a shout out to the Back to the Future bit, because even Danny couldn't believe it himself. He was like, oh, just looks at his fist and goes, wow.
I will say I do love the fact that the theme of the prom was apparently heaven. So I'm glad they didn't expand on that and have like Missy be part of the, the prom committee kind of thing. Cause that was it was a fun reveal that I'm glad we kind of got sprung with, rather than build it up and be didactic about it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I think that it could have just been an afterthought to put, what are we going to call the prom? Let's call it heaven.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So dude, you know what time it is. It is time.
Talk to me.
It is time to name your MVP. So, who is your MVP of 1993's My Boyfriend's Back?
Oh, it's right. It's difficult, but I will go with the mom. Yeah, I'll go with. It's not. I always in my head. I always think Mary Beth Hurt, and it's not Mary Beth Hurt at all.
It is Mary Beth Hurt, actually.
Oh, it is Mary. Sorry, I always get her mixed up with Diane Wiest, and that's because obviously Edward Herman's in Lost Boys.
Okay. Well, I mean. Yeah. You don't really have to justify Mary Beth Hurt being your MVP, because Mary Beth Hurt is my MVP of this film. It's one of those things where she's that character that's just so bubbly and fun and cute as hell in this. Like the fact that she's like, oh, my boy's feeling kind of hungry. I'm going to go get him a kid to eat. It's just those little things. And it's just so matter of fact that I wish a movie like The Dead Don't Die, which I was not the biggest fan of, took a few cues from this, because I think this film, in the way it approached that kind of comedic, matter-of-fact style parody, could be a template for other films, and I think the critics definitely got it wrong on this one. Philip, thank you so much for introducing me to this film, because this was the first time I had ever seen this film, and now I'm sold on it.
Excellent.
Before we go, though, please let our listeners know about the Adapted to Screen podcast, where they can find it, and where they can find you out there on the interwebs.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, I've got a podcast called the Adapted Screen Podcast, where we read a book or a short story and we watch the adapted movie and we discuss the differences. Sometimes we have guests and sometimes we don't. We've had some really good guests, actually. We've had Simon Bamford, who was in Hellraiser. We've had Scott Caporo, who was in Mrs. Doubtfire. Recently, we had Ducky Brimson, who wrote both the novel Top Boy and Top Dog, Top Boy, and the movie Top Boy as well. He also wrote Green Street. I don't know if you're familiar with Green Street at all, Jason. The one with Elijah Wood in when he played a football hooligan. I think
is that the one that's got Danny Dichio in it? Or I can't remember the guy's name. Whoever went on
Danny Dyer, you mean?
That's the guy. The guy who went on to host the show Football Factories.
Yeah, no, you're mistaking that film with Football Factory.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, which is funny because you said Danny Dichio, and Danny Dichio is actually a former professional footballer who I think retired over in America, and he was playing for. Is it like Ontario Timber? I think, or one of the. It was someone like that. Anyway,
see, it's all soccer related at this point.
Yeah, no. So that's so you can find us on Good Pods, you can find us on Spotify, basically any channel that you get your podcast from. You just type in Adapted to Screen, and we're also on Twitter as well at Adapted to Screen.
Excellent. And for the record, Danny Dichio apparently is the assistant manager for Sacramento Republican, but prior to that, he was working with Toronto FC. So, in case you wanted to come to, a movie podcast to get your soccer information, here we go.
I knew he was playing somewhere in Canada. I mean, he's got to be in his 50s now. In his England playing career or English playing career, he was most famous for playing for Queen's Park Rangers.
There you go. See, you come to It's Not That Bad for the movie news. You get schooled on soccer. There we go.
You get everything else. Yes, indeed.
All right, Phil, thank you so much. And to you, our listeners, thank you so much for listening to this episode of It's Not That Bad. Now, you guys know the drill. If there's a movie out there that you think is unfairly maligned, or there is no way in heck or even in the afterlife that we can find anything good to say about it, hit us up on social media at NotThatBadcast, or go to our website at notthatbadcast.com. While you're there, you can check out our other shows as well as our guest appearances page, where you can actually hear me on the Adapted to Screen podcast talking about the Circle. Until next time, Phil, thank you so much. Listeners, you guys are awesome. This is It's Not That Bad. Take care.
Permit me here and now to promise as a good comrade and a fellow artist that I will not report any of this, whatever it is, to the police.
What would you say you do here?
Abandoned Albums is a podcast that employs a deep bench of musical archivists. These determined individuals dig through the record crates of the world to find the lost music of artists. Using a patent-pending algorithm and spirited debate, we pick one album as an inroad to talk about and then reach out to the artists. We invite them into Thunderlove Studio. When we're lucky, they say yes. Abandoned Albums is a little like this.
That was TNUC by Grand Funk Railroad. And I spelled the word backward in my head, and I immediately went out and bought the record.
They're like, do you know who we are? And we were like, I mean, kind of.
Well, you're in blue. Of course we know.
Yeah, you're blue.
Yeah, you're blue, you're man.
Abandoned Albums isn't about the show, and it's not about the host or hosts. It's about the artist's work and making sure it remains, or in some cases, lands on, the cultural radar. It's why Abandoned Albums is the only music podcast that matters.
Wow, that was really, really enjoyable. Thanks, fellas.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you both.
All right, cool.
Abandoned Albums is a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.